As I said, that offer that I had made to the students in Rondebosch, perhaps one of those students went back to Israel. And I'm reading in the Star, one of our leading newspapers, the Star from Johannesburg. It says, then there is Henry Katzew. Katzew is well known among the Jews. Henry Katzew, K-A-T-Z-E-W, Katzew, a former South African journalist now living in Israel. Henry Katzew, who reported in the leading daily, the Star, dated the 5th of December 73, under the caption, "For Israel, a perpetual specter of war." Always the war, the sword of Damocles on their heads. For Israel, a perpetual specter of war. He continues, the 25-year history. In bracket, I put my own words. It's in the book. When you go home, you can read it, the full quotation. Now over 40 years, the strife, war going on, of the Judeo-Arab conflict since the birth of Israel should bring Israelis to the conclusion that politics will not solve the Jewish problem. This is the Jew talking now. But immediately you say, look, this Jew here, this is what he says. The Jews say he's a self-hating Jew. He hates to be a Jew himself. Must be something terribly wrong with your nation, that every time a man speaks out, he's a self-hating Jew or is an anti-Semite. He says, he continues, they must be prepared, the Jews must be prepared to open themselves to a spiritual alternative. Not my words. Go and check them up in the archives of the newspapers. They must be prepared, the Jews must be prepared to open themselves to a spiritual alternative, to effect a spiritual revolution, which in turn would lead to the vast new developments. I said, this young man must have been listening to me in the Rondebosch, that Hall of the Jews, in 1967. And again, learned men of the Jews, erudite scholars, Robert J. Donovan, on page 17 of his book, Israel's Fight for Survival, he says, in a report of the Institute for the Middle East published in 1959, it was noted that there was a time when there was no such thing as an Arab-Jewish problem. No Arab-Jewish problem. When relationship between the two peoples were as normal as those between cousins. And Professor Goitein, the chairman of the School of Oriental Studies at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, on page 21 of his book, Jews and Arabs, he repeats the same words. He says, there is much more to the popular belief that Jews and Arabs are close relatives, cousins. He puts down cousins, close relatives, and he says cousins, because they were descended from the brothers Isaac and Ishmael, the sons of Abraham, coming from the same father, Abraham. They were cousins. And the latest, on the 1st of January this year, 1989, 1st of January, Danny Bental, a Jew, described as a reservist in the Israeli army during his latest tour of duty in Gaza. This Jew, he is serving in the Israeli army. During his latest tour of duty in Gaza, reports in the Star again. This is not a Muslim newspaper. They refused to put our advert a second time because of the Jewish protest. We wanted to repeat our advert, they stopped it and said, no, our Jewish customers, they don't want us to have the thing in. That Star reports this young Jew talking. He is a journalist. He says that the Palestinian state already exists. The state of Palestine already exists. Let there be no mistake about that. It exists in Jabaliyah and Shati, in the mosques and in the mind. In the mind of the people, this Palestinian state is there. It exists. Judging by the proliferation of Palestine Liberation Organization flags in Shati, we have already begun to lose the battle for this square mile of Eretz Israel. This is the start. That first battle says we have already started to lose this battle for The first square mile of Israel is already gone. He says a sort of status quo has been reached. They have nothing to lose. The Palestinians have got nothing to lose. From this point on, life is cheap. By God, life is cheap when you know what you're fighting for. They are fighting for their independence, their national identity, their pride. He continues, for all the fear we inspire in the local populace, we no longer maintain absolute control over their lives, no longer maintain absolute control over their lives. The symptoms of eventual defeat for the Jews are already obvious. Who is he? A self-hating Jew, an anti-Semite. Say so. I want the guys who can say, look, this guy's an anti-Semite. He is a man serving the Israeli army and reported in one of the most leading newspapers of South Africa, the Star. Not in a Muslim newspaper in Saudi Arabia. He says, he continues, we catch a rock-throwing child throwing stone, probably no more than 12 years. No more than 12 years old. In his eyes, I detect a certain pride behind the fear of what is about to happen to him. Soldiers start shouting, hit him, smash his head in, break his arms, so he won't throw stones again. Teach him a lesson. He continues, this from soldiers who only days before had been law-abiding and God-fearing citizens. This from people, days before, God-fearing people, law-abiding citizens, and God-fearing citizens of the state that was created in order to shelter Jews from exactly those sentiments. Why was, they say, why did they create Israel? Because they're being persecuted by the Christians. For 1,000 years, 6 million Hitler destroyed. They wanted a refuge to protect them from all these, he killed the Jews, Christ killers, they killed our Lord, and they burned them, they raped their women, burned their homes. They wanted refuge and they got it. God gave it to them. Now, so these are the very people doing this. He says, he's crying. This Benny bin Tal, this Jew, young Jew is crying. So we, more than any other nation on earth, should understand that. Whenever a youth hurls a rock at me, stone at me, I cannot but feel guilty in the knowledge that were I in his situation, I would also be throwing rocks. If people were doing that to me, I would do the same thing to him. I'll be throwing rocks. But how can I, a soldier, turn to him and say, as a Jew whose people have known so much suffering at the hands of others, I sympathize with you. How can I say that? He is a soldier of Israel. How can he say that? I sympathize with you for what you're doing to me. These children are beautiful. Out of the litter and the stench, they emerge young jewels with clear dust-colored faces and wide, bright, innocent-seeming eyes. The 3-year-olds wave at us as our patrol passes. The 5-year-olds already understand that we are the enemy. Gleefully they show us the V for victory sign, not really appreciating what it means. Innocent children. We all know, the Jewish soldier says, we all know what to do, behaving firmly, yet politely, as the situation demands. And the situation sometimes demand us to be sons of bitches. Now go and quote me. He said, Deidat says that the Jews are sons of bitches. You know, what sickness is this? I'm telling you, this is Danny bin Tal, a Jewish reservist. These are his words reported in a reputable newspaper called The Star. And he says, and the situation sometimes demand us to be sons of bitches. And what they're going to do tomorrow morning in the newspapers, we say, Deidat says the Jews are sons of bitches. That's what they're going to say. Deidat said that they are sons of bitches. Am I saying that? This is what the Jew is saying, that this is how we behave, like sons of bitches. You know what that means. 21 years. 21 years have gone by since the territories fell under Israeli control. A whole generation has grown up there. Yet they are no closer to accepting us as anything but a foreign occupying power. And the Jewish settlers continue to live the lie, locked in their government-subsidized houses out of earshot of the rioting neighbors. They appreciate that their safety depends on the army. Every evening, they travel the strip in minibuses, distributing hot soup and food to the weary patrolling troops, trying to bribe them. They say, look after us, look after us. Because they know, Israel knows, You'll see the pictures in the little booklet. Look at the children there, look at the women there in those pictures, and you'll realize that if the Jews only put down their arms for a week, these little children and the women will chew the Jews alive. They'll tear them to pieces with their bare hands. Why wait for that? Why create that? He says here, every evening, and food to the weary patrolling troops. Most soldiers accept gratefully. Soldiers are soldiers. Somebody brings you hot soup, hot cakes, samosas, kusistas. Who wouldn't like to have that? Accept gratefully. Others kid themselves that by logical argument they may persuade the settlers that the day of judgment will come and they will return to live in Israel. Their bank accounts swelled beyond recognition by government compensation. The few peace-seeking idealists among us, among the soldiers of Israel, refuse that charity. They won't even tolerate, they won't even have that hot soup, they won't have that hot samosas, nothing. They know what it means. That's bribery. You're bribing us to carry on with this work. It says, the few peace-seeking idealists among us, among the soldiers of Israel, refuse their charity, not willing to condone the occupation by even the tiniest of symbolic acts. The Quran describes that beautifully. Allah says, "Minhumul mu'minuna wa aktharuhumul fasiqun." Among them, there are sincere, good-hearted, good people. Among the Jews, God says in the Quran, "Minhumul mu'minuna wa aktharuhumul fasiqun." But the majority of them are perverted transgressors. And He says about those, yet there are Israeli politicians, those perverted transgressors, who for their own cynical ends perpetuate the myth that the intifada, the uprising, the revolution in the making is trifling. It's nothing. You got the gun, you got the power. So those who claim that the grassroots popular revolution can be quelled deliberately mislead the nation. The fact is that there is no military solution to this political problem. There is no military solution to this political problem. Almost every reservist who has spent time in the territories this year has seen to that, has seen that. There is no political solution. There is no solution with the gun. And you carry on. He says, and if we stay, we are going to be dragged deeper into the quagmire. As world opinion shifts even further against us, eventually a solution of sorts will be forced upon us, upon the Jews. We will retreat with our tail between our legs, like a beaten dog with the tail between your legs. This is what he says. This is how you're going to end off. When the whole world opinion, and there is a saying among us Muslims, that there is a hadith which says a time will come that even the stones will cry that there is a Jews hiding behind me. You know what that implies? Stones don't talk. This is the language of the Bible also. Jesus Christ telling the Jews, He says, think not that you have Abraham as a father, for God can raise up children unto the stones to Abraham. Stones means this rubbish, heartless people, backward, barbaric people. Out of them He can create people who can represent the message of God. Stones, meaning the most hard-hearted people, most cruel people. Even they will recognize that this Jew is hiding behind a Christian name, a facade, get him, get him, get him. I said, why wait for that? Why not come right with God? Come right with the people, do justice to them. They're only asking for justice. Anti-Semites, again and again, anti-Semites. Max I. Dimont, Jews know. An erudite Jewish historian, Max I. Dimont, in his book, Jews, God and History, on page 205, he says, today the Arab world is arising from its slumber. I say thanks to you Jews. If the Arabs can use the Jews to hoist themselves out of the abyss into which history has hurled them, they can be blamed no more than other nations which are playing similar power politics. It is up to Jewish leaders in their own national self-interest to convince the Arab leaders that the Arab world can achieve its legitimate aims with the friendship of the Jews as in days past. Astute statesmanship can relax the present Israeli-Arab tensions because they are not caused by deep-rooted racial and religious antagonisms, but by temporary political expediencies. History has shown concludes Max Dimond. History has shown that Jew and Arab can live together without strife and with mutual profit. And Rodinson, another leading Jewish writer, I say cry with Rodinson. Rodinson is crying. In his book, Israel and the Arabs, this Jew is crying, Rodinson. But for one thing, they, the Israelis, cannot be said to have a historic right to a piece of territory because some of their ancestors supposedly inhabited it 2,000 years ago. For another, they ought to recognize that they have done a considerable wrong to another people in depriving them of rights at least as great as their own. The bitterness felt by the people to whom this wrong was done still persists. And as long as it does, the rights of the Israelis will remain purely hypothetical. They can only hope that the Arabs will one day recognize and accept them. Only then will the rights become real. The Arabs too have rights. In many respects, they may justifiably be held to be greater than Israelis. The Arabs of Palestine have the same rights over Palestine territory as the French exercise in France and the English in England. These rights have been violated without any provocation on their part. The wrong done to the Arabs by the Israelis is very real. The Jews say anti-Semites. Moses is an anti-Semite. Believe me, Moses says, you behold a stiff-necked people. So you Jews, you have been rebellious against the Lord since the day I knew you. Read Isaiah, read Amos. Yeah, Jewish prophets, what they have to say about you? Are they all anti-Semites? They hate you, or they hate themselves? What have you done? My dear brothers and sisters, there is a chance. There is a growing number of people among the Jews who realize this. As Brother Paul Finley has pointed out, Israel Saad, people like him. There are others, like Benny bin Tal, like Henry Kazio. There are people among the Jews who are crying about the injustice, that you are worse than the Nazis. You're doing things that what the Nazis didn't do to you, you are doing to these poor Palestinians. And this is, as soon as the world opinion, the world is realizing, yeah, not everybody is not asleep. They're knowing what's going on now. Day by day, more and more things are coming in the news. Daily, they're killing little children. Little children are being killed daily. This is the fate in the Times Magazine, the weekly news magazine, international. We read there, the Palestinian question. I end with this. So what manner of man would retaliate against a stone-throwing child by shooting him in the back as he ran away? What kind of people are these who would shoot a stone-throwing child by shooting him in the back as he ran away? What manner of government would retaliate by fining already poverty-stricken parents $1,000, demolishing their home and confiscating their meager possessions? What manner of people are these arrogant settlers who think they have a God-given right to commit such atrocities and still cry for more? What manner of people are we that we permit our government to give away billions of the American taxpayers' dollars to Israel every year, enabling it to continue to subjugate the Palestinian people? What manner of people are we, the Americans? This man is an American, Alice F. Smith from Santa Barbara, California, in the Times Magazine, February 20th, 1989. There are people who are waking up to the situation, and this will create either you change or destined for destruction. وآخر الدعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين.